let's just say I was not on his Christmas card. But I will add that the guys in the locker room loved it.
Right.
Most of the WWE guys loved it. They asked me for to autograph the book for them, and they put it over, and it is what it is. But I think many worse things have been written about WWE than I have.
Oh, and worse things have happened. Oh, absolutely. And now, especially, it's Um, nowadays it just seems like it's almost like you're just waiting for the next thing, the next big bad sad thing to happen. That's gonna like,
Yes.
Ultimate Warrior's death was so sad on so many levels. Like for me, like it was heartbreaking because that was a memory I have with my dad. Like my dad loved the Warrior. That was his guy, and we got to share that. When he passed, like that's another piece of that gone away. But the thing was, once again, you have people who otherwise would never talk about professional wrestling coming out, and it's the steroid thing. Again, it's a negative light on it and everything. And once again, it's WWE doing the damage control about how it's preventing people, wrestlers from after they're done, passing away early, well before their time, and things of that nature. So you're absolutely. I think you're the book that you and Sean collaborated on would be the least of their worries, in comparison to those. So, one thing about what do you, I guess, kind of to finish off on that point. What do you think of the man? Like, he is a fascinating character who I think is ridiculed a lot of times by casual fans. It's just simply he's old, he's out of touch, things of that nature. And I've always, when I listened to him on Steve Austin's podcast, and they did that live one that was on the network, the thing that's fascinating me is I don't think there's ever a clear separation of the man and the character. It's all wrapped up in one, to where nothing is a shoot. Everything always has a tinge of a work to it. There's always a work to it to be exploited. What do you think of him as a man, like as a promoter and everything?
Well, I think he's. You have to give him credit, no matter what you think of him personally.
Right.
Uh, he's he's been a billionaire at one point. So his wrestling juggernaut is worldwide. So I think he's probably a creative genius. Who maybe is lost his touch a little bit. But the guy's 69 years old.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know many 69-year-olds guys who do their job as well as he does. He knows everything that goes on in that company. He's passed a lot of the duties down to Stephanie and Hunter, but he's still the final say, in the company. So, what he does, I mean, I give him tremendous props, but he's taken a lot of prisoners along the way.
Do you think it's because, and who knows, maybe Vince McMahon outlives all of us. I don't know, but if when that time comes, do you think the company's in good hands? Do you think it's going to still be innovative, creative, to where it can keep, finding new levels of popularity after he is no longer, the final say so? Do you think it still has that, or will
I
have
think wrestling is always going to maintain a certain level of popularity. I mean, it's worldwide now. They're going into areas they've never been in before. They're going to be in India. They're going to be in China. They're going to have a real, truly worldwide fan base. So I think they just have to find ways to be innovative, and I think the lack of competition hurts. I think they were best when they had competition from WCW, and I don't see any organization in the near future, ever approaching that. But I think they have enough good people working there where they can sustain a level of popularity that it'll be around for years. I'm really not too concerned about that.
What would be fascinating is, like, it seems like obviously at their best is when they're in strong competition with something else. The what would be just incredibly fascinating then would be to see them elevate NXT to the level of where they're competing against the main roster. Make it a storyline. Make it so those, and that really, and I think if you go back to December when our evolution or revolution, however you want to say it, our evolution or whatnot, it was such a big show, and it widened so many eyes of people with the amount of work rate they brought into it, that if you have to have a team meeting on the main roster before a pay-per-view, it affected it. It affected a lot of people then, a lot of important people. So I think if you would take that and use it, just use it. I mean, that's if you use that to an extent where you create your own internal competition, do your Raw and SmackDown like you did in the 2000s, that would
absolutely.
I think it would certainly push a lot of people, and hopefully get people to the next level and whatnot. So
That's a good point. I think they really have to push themselves a little bit. I think sometimes they become too complacent.
Right.
Go by formula, and when you start doing formula stuff, then you start becoming too predictable. And when you become too predictable, such as what we've seen, with the WrestleMania lineup, then you start to lose fan interest, and you can't do that. You have to be on your toes. You have to be constantly thinking about taking a chance, doing new types of things, like you mentioned, NXT. There are great performers in NXT. If that's the future of WWE, then I think the future is pretty daggum good.
Oh, absolutely.
Because there are a lot of great. What I worry about is when they come out of NXT and they go to WWE, I'm more concerned about them getting derailed at some point. Their characters changed or becoming, very too overly scripted. That's the danger. I think in an NXT, they have a lot more liberty to do different things and let expand their characters. I think when they go to WWE, if they can just kind of lay off and let those guys become their own original characters, I think that's when they will succeed. They won't succeed, however, when their characters are stymied or too overly scripted, as we've seen many times in the past.
Oh, I mean, it's already happening now. The Ascension. You see the Ascension come up, and they were the most dominant tag team in the short history of NXT, but the guys. And now you've got them, I mean, it feels like, it reminds me when the Dudleys came to WWF at the time, and they're coming in sort of looking like their ECW selves, but it seems like WWE wanted, like, they kept them in the tie-dye. Bubba Ray had the stutter going on, but then I think it took about 6 months before they donned like the kind of the newer, the camo look on themselves. They had, more of we're just going to come work the hell out of the match kind of attitude. And that's when they blew up, and that's when TLC happens, and everything, and that's what I'm hoping ends up happening. But at the same time, if what's happening with the Ascension is really indication, like, you've got the Zanes, you've got the Nevilles, you've got, I'm a big Steen Owens guy, or Kevin Owens, guy, and I'd love to see what he does if he gets to the main roster and everything. But at the same time, I'm fearful because of what you just said. It's it's an interesting contradiction, because you'd think that the quintessential WWE model has always been the big guy, the big monster looking guy, like a great look and everything. And thing is, majority NXT guys are, let's face it, they're cruiserweights and in weight class. So I don't know if that means
what they think.
Yeah.
What Vince thinks of those kind of guys. Look how long it took CM Punk to emerge. Look how he had to do it.
Right.
He had to do the pipe bomb interview to break that glass ceiling.
And that's unfortunate where Daniel Bryan is at the moment. He's that smaller guy. Obviously not the guy. right. And that's, well, I don't know. We've talked about that. It remains to be seen how that's going to end up. The one book that I before we start talking about Vince McMahon, the one book though that's fascinating, because you would think it'd be a slam dunk of a story, would be Ric Flair's book. You would
Yeah.
think it would be, but when I listened to Mark Madden on a couple of episodes ago on Jim Ross's podcast, where he talked
Yeah.
about how it was a book in disarray, he kind of was brought in as as someone to kind of clean it up, so to speak, to try and get it to a salvageable release and everything. But it's not the most well received, is it, overall?
No, no, and they could have done a better. That could have been better. In fact, I wished I would have been able to write it, but of course, it was a WWE book, and like I said, I'm not on Vince's Christmas card list anymore, so that was a problem. And I remember at one point Jim Ross said, "Look, if you want to, you go ahead and write the book." And I didn't think it was fair at that point because so much work had been already done. You know, I wasn't going to take over a project at that point. I didn't think it was fair to anyone involved. But yeah, I think the definitive Ric Flair book has yet to be written. Um, he's. I guess you could probably write 10 books on Rick, and maybe the definitive book would not be written. But there's so much more, and a lot has happened since that book was written too in 2004.
Definitely. I mean, the Shawn Michaels match, that would be a huge part of that build up to that final, WWE moment at the time. So like realistically, how far off would we be from seeing that book happen with you and him together?
Well, like I mentioned before, my work keeps me very busy to say the least, and there's so many projects I've had to turn down in the last 5 or 6 years, many of which I would have loved to have tackled, but due to the lack of time, full-time job, everything else, I just haven't had the adequate time that I think would be needed to devote to a project like that. But who knows? I mean, I'll be retiring one day, and maybe we'll get together, and that definitive book will come out, and it'll have a very personal touch. I can guarantee you that.
That's because that's what the thing is, like, I love writing. I love seeing, like, different perspectives, how, you can take something like, essentially now we've seen, enough wrestling biographies to know how they're going to go, like from beginning to end, and sadly for the most part, it's most time with a ghostwriter who has little to no relationship with the wrestler, who doesn't like, there's not that personal touch that you could bring with Ric Flair, obviously. How, if you just had to throw it out there now, how would you frame that book, and how would it be different from all the others?
Um, think I would get it would be a little more personal rather than focusing on like his WWE book obviously was pro WWE. He a lot of it was about the time there, and there was it was an adequate amount of old school stuff with this starting out in the Carolinas. But there's a personal side of Rick that we really a lot of fans just haven't seen. He's such a wonderful person. He does a lot of stuff for people that you never read about. I mean, we hear all the stuff that John Cena does for Make a Wish, and that's quite admirable. But a lot of stuff Rick has done has never, uh, you know, been publicized, made a newspaper, or made the paper, or stuff like that. And I think I would want to show a lot more of the personal side. And the guy has endured a lot of hardships over the years, and he's the most energetic, optimistic guy you'd ever want to meet. Um, he, I think probably one of the most emotional times I've ever spent was, when Reed, his youngest son Reed, passed away.
Yeah.
That was, that was a very difficult time for everybody. And I think some personal stuff. People need to know the personal side of Ric Flair, and I think that's what I would like to write about and portray in regards to Rick.
Because when I would hear the stories about party till dawn, get up at 8 o'clock, go to the gym, hour or two on the elliptical, crushing it. What I was intrigued about was thinking, what's going through his head, in that the party's done, but I'm at that point where I'm on the elliptical. I'm just, I'm in a nonstop cardio routine.
Yeah.
What goes through somebody's